today. Thank you again. My name is Sadie St. Lawrence, and I am the founder and CEO of Women in Data. I am so excited for everyone to be here and for this conversation because it is such a important topic at this time to talk about AI and ethics and how we move forward. It's great to see some of the poll results. It looks like most people here are thinking that AI is gonna enable a lot of positive change. So excited to talk about that and how we can shape it. Coming in second place is it's a little too early to tell, so we'll see what happens there. And then only 17% of you think it's going to take over the world. So I love kind of seeing where everybody's at this morning on California time. But again, welcome and thank you for joining us today. So before we get started, just want to share a little bit more about Women in Data. So if this is your first ever Women in Data event, welcome. We are so happy to have you. Women in Data is a community of diverse data leaders, citizens, practitioners. Just as you answered in the poll questions, or where you're at in your data career, are you interested in it? Are you transitioning into it? Is it early stages? Are you a data leader? All are welcome in our community. And so today we have a community of roughly 50,000 people, members in 60 plus countries and chapters in over 60 cities. So we welcome you to our global webinar, but hope that you have the opportunity to connect with one of our local communities at any time. Again, if this is your first event, welcome. If you are a Women in Data member, welcome back. We're so happy to see you and have you here again. Here in Women in Data, as I said, all are welcome, but our values really are that we share knowledge, we cheer each other on, we're accountable, and we lead and create opportunities for others to lead. So if that's something you want to be a part of, definitely stay connected with us. There's lots of different ways to get involved through on-demand, quarterly, and yearly. But I don't want to take up any more time because we have an amazing guest here today, and I'm so excited for this conversation. Dr. Athina Kanioura, she is the Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer at PepsiCo, where she leads digital strategy, the company-wide digital transformation. And prior to that, she was the Chief Analytics Officer and Global Head of Applied Intelligence at Accenture, and was a university professor where she taught MBA in economics. So she has a very robust career, but one of the things that I don't know if we'll get into it, but it looked like we both share a love for piano and tennis. So tennis I'm learning to love. I think right now it's more of a love-hate relationship for me. But maybe we'll get into more of the fun things of tennis and piano at the end. So Athena, welcome.
So let's say the lovely to be here. I'm so excited. And then, it's always very refreshing to have this type of forums. Women in data, right? Women in STEM, women in data. It's amazing. And I see kind of more than 100 women in this panel. So I couldn't be more excited.
Yes, it's a great time. I know you have been passionate about getting more women in STEM in the space for many years and do a lot of mentoring yourself. And so it's always good to come together and see so many joining.
For sure. And thank you for taking the lead in this space. It's needed.
So I want to dive right in because we have a lot to cover today with ethical AI and really PepsiCo's strategy and position and how they're looking at this space. So just to level set for all of us in the room, how do you define ethical AI and why is this just important to PepsiCo's overall strategy in general?
Well, for sure. So, firstly, as a company, we do have a framework and I would say a playbook around responsible business. What does it take to be a responsible business? Everything anchoring on how we manage our portfolio, how we deal with our consumers, our employees, and then what does it mean in terms of our processes and technology investments? Within that responsible business framework, we have a responsible AI and ethical AI framework, processes, and toolkit. And this has been a critical component of our transformation journey, but also how we think of the technology transformation, especially AI, in a responsible but industrialized way. Now, what do I mean by that? And let me elaborate. In a company as complex as PepsiCo, where we are operating, every country in the world, where we have products from Gatorade to Lay's to Doritos to, Pepsi, etc., etc. You can imagine complex supply chains, complex innovation cycles, um, go-to-market systems that are very different. And I mean, some of them are warehouses, distributors, we go there. And as such, the need of industrialized capabilities around AI becomes integral. Otherwise, everything remains proof of concepts, pilots, etc., etc. However, because of this specific complexity, there is always a danger of, you know, uh, having consumer cohorts that we are addressing, which are not representative of the society, having practices around employees which are not inclusive, having processes around our suppliers, manufacturers, and farmers, which are not best practice on sustainability. So what we've said is, while we are setting up rules and guidance from a legal perspective, systems perspective on how we deal with that, we want to ensure that when it comes to identification, when it comes to targeting, when it comes to connecting parts of our business which are more sensitive, we will have guardrails, frameworks, and processes and playbooks that will tackle algorithmic bias versus certain cohorts of the population, data transparency and visibility, traceability of everything from source to shelf. That's how we call it, from the agro part of the business till all the consumers buy our products. And also data transparency and traceability as well. So the ethical AI framework is a mechanism which is pretty much automated right now that addresses any future system connectivity and current system connectivity so as to mitigate against bias, lack of transparency and visibility, and traceability predominantly.
Can you share some examples of how PepsiCo is implementing this? You mentioned a little bit in terms of like looking at the data from source to shelf and traceability, but how does this get implemented then into the decision-making process, right? Because I look at data as like a sixth sense, right? It gives us more information that we couldn't normally get through what we see every day or hear every day. Like it opens up our awareness. So how are you implementing then this ethical AI practice into that everyday operations and then decision-making process?
Sure. Then let me give you one of the usual examples. Although we are not a retail business, we are still investing heavily on direct to consumer and those consumer engagements and moments that matter with the consumer. As you know very well, every market has very different what I call GDPR type of constructs, right? I mean, there is a GDPR in Europe, but currently in the US, there is a bit of a proliferation of data rules state by state, but not a federal process end to end. So as such, when we do talk to our consumers, whether it's on the physical stores or whether it's on the digital, think metaverse, we need to ensure that from an AI framework, number one, we don't discriminate against certain cohorts of consumers. So we take out biases around, okay, what is the addressable population that we want to engage with? A representative, and I'm talking US specific for now as an example, a representative also of the population blueprint of North America, both for our beverages business and of course our free-to-play business. So that's number one. And as such, the ethical AI framework ensures that even when you don't have enough data, historical information around population trends and how each of that cohort of population consumes our products, you still are able to take out that bias, what we call mitigation bias practices, right, out of the algorithms. So that is one. The second component is ensuring that there are always opt-in mechanisms in that ethical AI framework. And remember, and still there are markets that you don't have to opt in. There are markets that you only have to opt in, and there are states in the US that you can opt in or opt out. So we've said, no, we're not going to play that opt-in, opt-out game. You have to opt in. Every time you need to engage, there is an automatic mechanism where you have to opt in. And therefore, the sharing of information about what you are, who you are, it's up to you to decide what you want to share. But as I said, we are trying to go away from this one-to-one specific precision targeting that many other companies do, because we know there is always bias into the system. So that's the second component. The third one is, as part of the ethical AI framework, there is a self-learning component. The AI algorithms, we give them a baseline, but in reality, as the information evolves and more data are coming, we always stress test the validity and the stability of the models, because every model, as it keeps evolving and you throw more data, if the data comes from the same source, then the bias just gets augmented. So what we are trying to do is ensure that the sampling components of this data is much more broader than the original baseline that we had. So we pretty much stress test the density of the information that we are getting and the distribution of the information that we are getting. And that's one simple aspect of how we deal with direct to consumer, because we want, as I said, maximum representation, maximum distribution, maximum velocity, maximum variation and variability. All of those components, similar to how the population is, data is the same. You need exactly data to behave in a similar way. So we start comparing the physical infrastructure with the data infrastructure. And the more they become similar, that shows that we have mitigated against this AI bias. And that's why the ethical AI framework becomes realized and executed.
So is it almost you're creating a digital twin, right? Because I love what you said. We're trying to match the physical framework with the digital framework. And that's all the digital framework is, right? It's a model of the world. Sometimes the model looks very similar to the real world, and other times it's quite far off, right? So
Right.
I can see though that there could be many challenges. You mentioned just how diverse PepsiCo is. It's in every country, and the different products, anywhere from Pepsi to Doritos to my favorite, the hummus, all of the things that PepsiCo has. What are some of the challenges then with modeling this world of the digital world to the physical world, just with the diversity of what you're dealing with from PepsiCo, not only from products, but the customers and the countries that PepsiCo operates in?
First, let me say it's exactly a digital twin. This is exactly what we are doing, which is quite complex, but I believe is the best way for us to be confident and comfortable that we are protecting our consumers, our employees, and our customers, right? So, to your question, first of all, there is a level of complexity when it comes to our categories and our portfolio itself, because we have some products that they have high velocity. Think of our Cheetos, Doritos, Lay's. I mean, they go, I mean, we are all consuming them like all the time. Then you have some others that have less velocity. So, quicker, right? Okay, when you buy your beloved kind of oats, you don't buy every day or you don't buy every other day. I mean, you have enough quantity to last you a couple of weeks at least, right? And then you have, of course, the beverages portfolio, which also has different velocity. So the velocity itself, the frequency of selling, just to make it simple, and then how the supply chain reacts into that is a complexity by itself when it comes to AI systems. And that what we are trying to do to be able to tackle that with the power of technology is to connect the planning process end to end, which is what we call integrated business planning. So demand sensing, demand planning, commercial planning, supply planning with an AI system. Think of it as a brain where short and medium term, long term, you are able to forecast how this velocity will change, what consumers want, and anticipate the supply chain signals. So that's one way for us to be able to mitigate for this portfolio complexity. I would say the biggest complexity, to your earlier question, is about differentiating consumer expectations and the geographical footprint of PepsiCo, which makes it slightly unique because one is the regulation is different. You have China for China, you have Russia for Russia, you have, whether we like it or not, there is an East cluster and there is a West cluster. So if we were to look at these differentiating points that either a government or region is when it comes to regulation around the AI, that creates a lot of complexity. So what we have done is we have created an enterprise architecture around AI, but also a flexible architecture around AI, where we are able to accommodate for global and local ecosystems. That's one. The second is consumers themselves are quite different in terms of the adoption of AI technology. So you will have nations, and I'm talking nations, and I look at our China business, which, I mean, being digital first in terms of interaction is a must have. Mhm. I mean, they want to be operating social commerce and immersive commerce, and a metaverse for them, it's part of what they want to engage with those companies. And therefore, using AI is part of the day to day, right? You go to other markets, parts of Latin America, where they still want to have some type of digital experience, but they like the physical interaction. So the way we have adjusted the AI roadmap is, number one, to be thoughtful of the cultural differences of our consumers and our employees, give flexibility in how we're building the AI systems, but also allow for the responsible AI and ethical AI framework to take into account the different regulations as well, which is quite critical.
So one of the things that comes up when we talk about AI ethics is not just in the sense of are we removing bias, but is there also transparency and fairness, right? So we talk about creating this digital twin of the world and model, which is fantastic. But how do we then ensure that one, we're using the data, not only just using the data properly, but honoring privacy concerns and data collection when it comes to creating this model of the world, because there's so many benefits to building this model, right? It allows us to test out things in this digital space, and forecast and make predictions. But how do we ensure just there's that transparency and fairness in the system, just in the data collection process to begin with, if even should we be
Yeah.
collecting that?
Yeah, I think on the data collection, the fact, as I said earlier, that we are, when it comes to consumers, every information they have to opt in. That's the principle globally. We don't debate about it. We don't compromise that. When it comes to other parts of data, because I think sometimes there is this confusion. Oh, it's only the data that I share. No, it's also the data that you put out there, the public domains, that actually you, from the moment you post, it becomes public domain information, right? We are also very sensitive on what data we collect in the public domain and how we host it in the systems. So everything that we feel will create what I call, to your point, practices of unfair treatment of segments of the population we don't collect. That's why we have specific data templates, with data taxonomies and data definitions of data that we collect, data that we don't collect. So that is the second component. The third component is a couple of years ago, we established what we call a data lifecycle framework. The data lifecycle framework allows you to see, okay, from the source of the information down to the usage of the information. So before it goes to any type of model, right? What is the value chain of the data? And how do we trace it back, as I said, to the source, and then how does it trace it back to the model that it goes? That we have established for every type of data domain in the organization, whether it's a data domain that is used across programs or it's a data domain that is very specific to one vertical within a market. And this data lifecycle framework, we have it published. Everyone can see it in the organization. We audit that. So we have our control organization making sure also they feel comfortable with the data traceability component. So also the modeler, the data scientist can go back and see the source of the information. And so these are the things that I recommend. I mean, they are less painful than people believe. It takes discipline to be able to establish that. And it takes rigor when it comes to data governance, data quality controls, and data processes that you need to have in place.
Yeah. So we had a session yesterday, and that was a big topic of it was the data quality, the governance, the traceability, the observability. is this some for many this comes as an afterthought, right? Okay, we're going to implement this model in production. I mean, it's kind of the computer scientist's continued dilemma, which is I do something and then I'll document it, right?
Right.
So
Sure.
I'm guessing in terms of this data lifecycle framework, where is the data governance put into the life cycle? Is this something from the beginning? Is this something that's kind of woven through the life cycle, or what's your approach to, governance in that data life
Yeah.
cycle?
So we have it woven throughout the lifecycle framework, but we do set it up from the very beginning. So nothing is being implemented in this company unless we review the data governance principles. So who is the data owner? Who is the data steward? What is the data usage? What is the data traceability? Who is responsible for data quality controls? And I know it sounds, oh my God, how many rules do they have? However, you can automate those rules. And then you have a control tower that does that in a very different fashion. So you don't need to have, thousands of people doing that. However, the biggest problem typically around data quality and data governance is finding the data stewards in the business. They cannot be the technical people. We have that. Is the data stewards in the business. So for us, it's part of the core on how we deal with systems. Because we talk about AI, we talk about responsible AI framework and decentralization of AI. AI systems are as good as the data that you feed them. So unless you fix that from the source, then pretty much then you can at least mitigate part of the bias that AI systems that comes from the data bias, right? There is other AI bias that other come from the data bias, it comes from the algorithms, which is a very different problem that you have to solve.
So talking about policy and procedure and committees, Nadia is asking, do you have a data ethics committee in place? And I'll add on to it if you don't, is that something that you're looking into? What are your stance on committees? That's a lot of companies take that approach to, know, try and deal with or look like they're dealing with the fairness and bias that comes off in it.
We have a committee. We call it the Responsible Business Committee, right? Which is a bit broader. Which I chair with our chief legal officer, and also supported by our CIO, where we look at all those standards, both in terms of policy and regulation and processes and frameworks, et cetera, et cetera. And then under us, of course, there is a working group that ensures that everything across the company goes through the certain kind of guardrails and processes and activation points, end to end. And that's why I don't believe there should be, in reality, one person responsible. You need to have a consortium of leaders in the company that lead that on behalf of the rest of the enterprise. So yes, we do have that. Now, also in parallel, I'm a big advocate externally, and I'm working very closely with the Capitol Hill and the U.S. government to be able to ensure that both from the AI committee standpoint, which is bipartisan, as many of you know, and also the different caucuses, how we can ensure that at least some type of regulation is set in place as AI systems become more pervasive in our day-to-day, as still in the US, there isn't uh, the GDPR equivalent. So data privacy is very subjective and how you deal with data regulation. So we as PepsiCo, we are working with several parties, with NIST, with Aspen Institute, of course, with Capitol Hill, to try to represent the industry in this type of discussion.
Or so you mentioned a little bit how you're working with governments, which I think is great, helping to spread awareness and educate. But I know also that you have experience working with academia. What role do you feel that academia plays in this space and NGOs? How do we work with all these external stakeholders to move forward in this space?
Yeah, well, I'll start with academia because academic research around, and I would say I would split academic research in two parts: the theoretical academic research, right, on both the privacy component, but also the AI systems themselves, and then there's the applied academic work, which is when you stress this with data, actually how these applications interact in the long term. They are a critical influence factor. And my observation so far, and me coming from academia, I still am very close to many academics, both in Europe and, of course, in the US. There are the continuous challenge that academics have is how do you go from the theory to the applied science of both AI, data analytics in general, without being perceived as too simplistic. What do I mean by that? Because typically academics are testing everything in a very small sample. Why? Because companies, I'm not saying companies like that, but companies don't tend to share the data that they have, and therefore whatever they have is very small in terms of samples. Because the tech companies also don't want to share too much, right? So, I believe so. But however, I believe they are pivoting. I mean, to give you some examples, we are shaping and will be announced very soon a partnership with Stanford on AI. We have a partnership with Wharton. We have a partnership with MIT. So all those partnerships with academics have one single mission. One is can industry academics work together to be able to find practical applications of AI usage in a responsible way? As simple as that, right? While we evolve the science, we need to involve the understanding of the implications of the science in real life problems. And that's why academics, the more they work with us, and me also coming from academia, is the example of that, the more we go from the theory to the applicability and the execution. So huge role. Now, NGOs, I feel they provide the right set of frameworks and policies. Is my friend Miriam Vogel, who is also advising, the government right now, who is running an NGO around AI. And it's a great example of that, of an NGO who was really kind of taking shape on AI regulation, right? And is now advising the government of how we should be doing that at scale in the US. Those type of constructs add a lot of value. If the NGOs are too detached from the reality of what AI wants to solve, then again, doesn't become very practical.
So I want to go back to what you said about academia and going from theory to applied, because when I look at your career journey, you made that exact transition, right? So working in academia and having a PhD and then going to lead what is actually called applied intelligence, right? At Accenture. Any tips for
But
those
the name
in the
was
audience?
telling.
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't be more of a fit, right? So any tips for those in the audience who maybe are in academia or wanting to transition? How do you go from that more theory to the applied?
Can I just say I study pace? Because I don't want this to be a misconception. So it's like I love academia. It's my first, probably my last passion in life. So I still teach in Imperial College London. In my free time, no, over summer I do teach. But it's the transition, I would say, is smaller than I expected. Say in the sense that what the academic world teaches is to be much broader, much more inclusive, much more open-minded, much more, out of the possible. Think big. Think big. I mean, it's and then when you go to the practical world, and I remember my first days in consulting when I did the pivot, and I was looking for this perfection, and I said, oh my God, it's like, oh, my accuracy is like, 95. Why can it not be 97? Why can it not be 99? So you learn to be practical. That, not being perfect is fine as long as you can drive 99% of the value for the organization. Now, the pivot. I think, and the pivot applies also from consulting to industry, right? The one advice I would give is there are more similarities than differences. I think that this misconception of two different worlds. No, actually, applied research is needed everywhere that you do. And I think what academia teaches you is to go from the strategic thinking and filter that down to a level where your students are able to understand what you're talking about. I didn't teach PhDs. I taught everything from undergrads to masters. And I keep joking when I was teaching undergrads, after a night out in the pub the night before, you have to make them focus. Similarly, I have to make focus my stakeholders in something, and now in the industry when they are not experts in these topics, right? So uh, get the best of both worlds. Having the best of both worlds gives you a very different perspective. And I notice, and kudos to many of our academics right now, it's a very different era comparing to when I did the pivot. Many are taking sabbatical. Many are going and working for the big companies. I mean, I know many friends of mine, they are working for also Amazon and Google and Microsoft and other big corporations in life sciences. And and some of them stay in the industry, some of them go back to academia. But this hybrid is refreshing.
Yes. I I can very much relate to your move. I worked in a neuroscience lab and moved to and then moved to industry. And I was so surprised. It's like, wait, I don't get a grade. And how do I know if this is right? And it has to be done in 2 weeks. Everything is much faster. Doesn't need to be perfect
Exactly.
about progress, right? Which
Absolutely.
is great because we live in a very fast changing world. I mean, every day I feel like something new with AI comes out and new advancements, whether it's with chips and GPUs and the progress we're making on the hard technology to the algorithms that we're using with large language models to the end products that are being released. So how do you continue to adapt and evolve, particularly as a large organization to these emerging trends and technology? You can't jump on every bandwagon, but
No.
how do you know when, hey, we need to start being focused in this area and take it seriously and adopt our policies and procedures accordingly?
So first of all, you cannot stop learning. I think that's probably the first advice that I would give to everyone, including myself. Right, I'm always trying as much as possible to be up to speed with all the latest and greatest in tech. Although I'm now a bit more detached from that world. However, we are also very pragmatic as an organization on the things that we know have more of an importance to us than others. Give you an example on AI. 90% of what we will be doing on AI is on the predictive AI part, not on the generative AI part. So although, we entertain all the great ideas that people have and everyone is super excited, right? We are now also regulating this space as a company. We have set up a committee. You have to qualify why you want to do it and why what I would call more conventional AI techniques are not able to deliver that for you. It's not, again, because we want to stifle innovation. It's because we want to be pragmatic of the use of each of the different AI technologies and what's the cost benefit analysis for a company like PepsiCo. So education is important. I think for me, that's say the number one and, number 100 advice I would give. Uh, People I feel they are not as educated in this topic as they should be. And therefore, we have the practitioners, we have a responsibility, number one, for us to be up to speed with everything, and then to educate the rest of the organization in a way that we don't compromise safety, we don't compromise IP, we don't lead to future liability issues for the company, and we respect the ecosystem. Um, One example, imagine is because of Gen AI, they allowed every marketeer in this company to create content. They would love that, but how many copyright rules would we have broken in the process? A lot, I'm pretty sure, right? So what we have done, we have established the governance where the marketing organization needs to stand in front of a committee and saying, okay, why do you need it and how do you need it? And okay, what are you involving? Is this policing? People can call it policing, but is it necessary in the context of the evolving nature of text to image? It is necessary for now. So this is where we need to be thoughtful on where do we unleash?
Mhm.
And I unleash predictive AI, I have unleashed predictive AI in the company. And where do you regulate more, especially in the newer areas?
I can see how some people think that committees can be policing, but do you think there's an opportunity that we have our committees also be an opportunity where it allows us to think through our problem more, right? So before we go and do something, we're taking a time investment, usually a resource investment, right? By having to actually write your thoughts on paper and create a strategic plan and get to the why. I love the saying of like, start with the end in mind. Like, what is that final outcome? I think there could be some potential benefits to, having to go to a committee and review because it could not only make sure it's ethical and it's going to have the right impact, but potentially also help you to find your problem better, which is
So
such a challenge, right? As Einstein said, he'd spend like the first, what is it, 50 minutes of 60 minutes defining the problem. So is there a way for us to, as practitioners in this space, to reshape our thinking and going to a committee and saying, oh, this, they're policing me, or why do I have to jump through all the hoops, right? And say, maybe this is an opportunity for me to really define my problem and to get really clear on what is that impact and outcome I want to have, and how do I start with the end in mind? Or, do you not see the two of those coinciding to support?
no, no, no. This is how we see it. Very clear. It's what is the strategic rationale of you wanting to use those systems? I mean, you need to have a business case. Imagine a company like us, and everyone is working on these small, little, nice, sexy things, right? It will be the Wild West. So, and the motto that we have around that AI digital transformation is big changes to big things. So things that will make a big impact for our people, our consumers, and our customers. So, to that degree, if anything fits within our bigger strategy, I mean, there is a North Star. Now, if you want to experiment, I can also accept that. I mean, we have people that they want to experiment. Okay, we'll give you the environment to experiment. So we'll give you the processes and some people call it sandbox. I call it differently, but we give you the ability to do so. So to that degree, we are accommodating both. But when we say we are accommodating both in a very thoughtful way, again, that protects our people inside the company and everyone else outside the company. So it's not policing, it's governance.
Yes. And I think we've seen some instances where governance was needed. I mean, if we look at the crypto industry this past year, I think that's a perfect use case of like, maybe it would have been better to have a little bit more governance in the beginning and have a better outcome for not just the stakeholders in the company, but society as a whole. So shifting gears a little bit to more kind of future thinking, how do you envision the role of AI and PepsiCo's future growth and transformation, right? So you're leading strategy and digital transformation. What role does AI have in that at PepsiCo?
Oh, huge, huge. I mean, it's a very big driver for both the growth agenda of this organization and the profitability agenda, what we call bottom line performance of this company. Because we have embedded AI in both, I would say, what we call the consumer activation points, how we engage with consumers, commercial excellence, end to end. So how we sell and how we guide our sales associates on what they should offer, to the stores, etc., to our supply chain to make it more efficient. Think of predictive asset maintenance that goes with that. Our logistics and operations. I mean, few people know that we have the second biggest fleet after UPS in the world. So, I mean, how do we enable our drivers with better visibility, better performance, better tools also for safety, and planning, which I mentioned before as an example, and employee experience. So in everything that I just described, there are AI pipeline spirits end to end that guide everything from the connectivity with the core systems. So linking from the source systems data infrastructure to our digital infrastructure. And then, of course, the user interfaces that come with that. So we have a set of AI applications interconnected and also APIs that link our AI systems with our partners' AI systems. So we have APIs that link with Walmart's AI systems on the back end. So we can have visibility end to end. So it's a critical success factor of our future. And it's timely next week. I'm actually have a session with our top 200 on the importance of AI. So they've seen it, but actually we are continuing our education. So it shows the importance for the organization.
I love it. I love it. So we're getting some really great questions coming in the Q&A. One is, are there, which AI frameworks or tools are you using? So do you want to share any kind of advice on tools you're using, or maybe tools young people should be learning if they want to get in the space too?
On AI tools specifically, look, firstly, I mean, depends on what is your passion, right? Are you a computer scientist, or are you more of a data scientist, or are you a data governance people? There is a proliferation of AI tools. Um, we do have very strong partnerships with established tech companies. So Microsoft is one of our biggest tech partners. So as such, I mean, our teams are using extensively the toolkit of Microsoft. And of course, because of the partnership with OpenAI and ChatGPT, subsequent to that, we also have the ability to use the generative AI component of that, right? So look, I would start with whatever is available out there. I don't want to tell you, oh, use this technology versus others. I mean, and I'm not saying that to my team. They have to be, of course, part of our enterprise architecture, but in their free time, I'm pretty sure they're testing everything under the sun, right? So it's be educated and test out some of those technologies, but be very thoughtful about what you ask those technologies to do for you, right? From an AI governance, I haven't personally seen anything that is out of the box, that it doesn't need customization and further elaboration. So reality is our AI framework has been much more custom, and the AI tools that we have built to support specifically algorithmic bias and data transparency is a custom tool that we have created. And again, because of the complexity of our company that we have and the proliferation of markets that we operate. If you are running in one market in a simpler industry, there are out of the box solutions that I absolutely recommend that you guys should try and use.
So Lisa's asking, what are your concerns, if there are any, about AI? So I know we had this as a, kind of a jokeful question in the beginning. Will AI take over the world? Right. But do you personally have any real concerns about AI, and then any if it pertains to?
I do have concerns. I mean, I love technology, but I also have concerns in two specific domains. One is I believe the technology companies right now are riding the wave of AI technology, um, but more from a development perspective, less from a user centricity perspective. And as such, there are way too many releases out there without the right governance, validation, um, uh, even testing whether they could be industrialized or not. And again, because whether you are a consumer or a corporation, you are bombarded by this release and release and release and release, and you don't know, okay, when do I start versus stop? So that's one of my fears is, when do you put a stop to this continuous development, right? The second big thing is there are domains that we shouldn't be using AI for now, till they prove its maturity. So as an example, we don't use AI for hiring. We just don't, because reality is in certain markets, there is inherent bias of the external information. So till the systems prove that inherently they can tackle bias of the data collection process, and be very clear, not the algorithm, then we shouldn't be using the systems at scale. So then, yes, of course I am concerned. And that's why for us, it's, as I said, the governance plays a significant role in how we qualify AI versus more traditional ways of doing business.
Diana's asking if you can speak a little bit more about some of the collaborations with Stanford, MIT, any of the collaborations with academia. She's interested in those.
Yeah. So I think the Stanford, there will be you guys are the first ones to know, there will be a release, a press release coming out very soon. But since I have announced it, so I'm going to give you a slightly kind of more preview. So we will collaborate very closely with the Center of Artificial Intelligence on everything from projects and programs and executive education and research in the space, including, of course, collaboration of the professors with our people, etc., etc. So it's holistic partnership on AI. And we have a partnership with Wharton on upskilling, digital upskilling and executive education on AI and technology and digital of many of our executives. Um, so it's more targeted to the executive population. And on MIT, there's specific research on supply chain and operational systems, again, in North America, more specifically. We don't have only academic partnerships in North America. We have academic partnerships in the rest of the world. That's why I believe in a network. I think the good thing is that despite, I think, people believing, oh, these universities are competing, these universities are actually collaborating extensively on the back end, and many of those professors have been in one, then went to another, etc., etc. So we are also acting as what I call a data fabric between those universities uh, in terms of practical applications. So if you are in an industry, I definitely encourage you to look into, for your space, which academic institution can add a lot of value for you in terms of end-to-end partnership.
I love it. Diane is one, I hope you're okay with me calling you out. It's one of my mentees from a few years ago in the Women in Data program and is going to be headed to school in Barcelona in ethical AI. So one, congratulations, Diane, and great question to see how you can now collaborate.
And we have we have a big digital hub in Barcelona, as PepsiCo, many AI experts, and we partner with the universities there. So amazing universities. I was teaching in Barcelona for many years.
I love it. I love it. So as we're getting close to time today, but I do have one last question for you because I know you have mentored so many individuals. And so I love to do some minute mentorship. So do you have any advice for young people in their career, particularly in the field of AI? What advice would you have to those getting started?
Oh my God. First of all, obviously follow your passion. AI is what I call the buzz of the day, but it's going to be the future as well. And I remember when I started, and I'm older, you guys. Yeah, look at you, you're so young. I remember when I started and I formed Applied Intelligence in Accenture. People were saying, okay, fine, let your do it your own thing. They thought I was like a nice exotic team, small team of people that came from academia and we wanted just to do nice, sexy things, right? And now look how mainstream it is. So follow your passion. It will pay off no matter what, right? That's number one. The second, be practical about what this technology can do versus not. Don't boil the ocean. I mean, there are things that AI can unleash tremendous value, but there are things that AI cannot do, cannot handle right now. So that level of grounding is super important. And the third one, since we are talking on women in data, be bold and assertive about your abilities, your capabilities, and how you can change the world, because we need more women in STEM. We need more women in data, more women in AI, because we do make a big difference, both from a thinking perspective, but also execution. We are much more execution focused than many of our male colleagues in this space. So that would be my advice.
I love it. It's perfect advice, and what a great way to wrap up today's session. Athina, thank you so much. Talking with you gives me hope about the future of AI, and I just appreciate all the work that you're doing, not only in the space of PepsiCo, but outside and collaborating with academia and government and NGOs such as Women in Data. So thank you for making such an impact in the world and leading with thoughtfulness and positivity and creating the environment that we all want to see. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Sadie, and thank you for kind of establishing this NGO. I think it's an amazing forum for women to connect, but also kind of, as I said, further the science of data for the generations to come.
Yes, it's all about the conversation and collaboration. That's how we can learn. So thank you so much. Again, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who joined us today. We do have 2 more sessions this week, one on AI in public service and then one on AI in the financial services. So if you're looking to understand more about different industries and want to meet other women in this space, feel free to join us. But most importantly, I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Athena, thank you again. We will catch you all on LinkedIn and in the Women in Data community and wherever we can be found at the next session. So have a wonderful day, everyone, and thank you so much.